Hello, welcome back. I'm Tommy, and I help people step into their power by identifying and eliminating self-defeating thinking and behaviors. And today we're going to dive right into a topic that fits perfectly with that goal that I have for the people that I work with and for the messages that I share here with you and on Facebook and other social media outlets. And that is addiction. And we're going to look at various types of addiction, and we're going to look at some of the methods by which you may seek to overcome addiction. So addiction is a lifelong part of my life. Somehow I've just concluded that this was part of my journey this time around here on planet Earth. And I certainly have had my own addictions that I have overcome. And I was also born into a home where addiction was part of the family dynamic. So I often look at that, and I can see generations before my parents and myself and generations after in my family and in other people's families. Addiction is just something that is multi-generational. However, I do believe as we start to break the cycle of addiction, we break it down and make the opportunity for future generations to not have to go through the same suffering that people with addictions go through. We can keep breaking that down generation to generation by learning more about addiction, by demonstrating through the generations ways in which we can overcome our addictions, by teaching our children better than we were taught, and our children teaching their children even more. So those are my general overall understandings of addiction, certainly in terms of a family dynamic. The one thing that is probably 99% certain when it comes to certain addictions, usually those that are more serious in nature, like drug and alcohol addiction, often they come as a result of some form of trauma that has been experienced in childhood or even in adulthood, a traumatic situation, people who go to war, people who are in the armed forces and so on, who face very traumatic situations like that, can come home and suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and very often addiction goes with that disorder. Various mental health issues go hand in hand. So oftentimes we wonder, did the depression come first or did the addiction come first? Because they often go hand in hand as well. And I'm not sure that we always know what the answer to that is, but mental health, addiction, trauma and addiction, and something to do with the generations of addiction in families, if that is more environmental, where we see it and so we take on the behavior, or whether there's genetics and the environment involved. Those things are always discussed, researched, and sometimes debated. My feeling about in my family, I think it's both. I think there's something in my genetics that if I choose to set off those genes, then my addictive behaviors in nature come into play. And I also think that there was some modeling done in terms of the environment and what I witnessed growing up and so on that also influenced me. So whatever all the reasons, addiction is rampant in our society. Unfortunately, as a result of the pandemic, on many different levels, many reasons for people in terms of what the pandemic has created for them in terms of anxiety and stress. We know that addiction is on the rise, especially alcohol consumption. The numbers are proving that because we have statistics that very clearly show that since the start of our pandemic. So addiction recovery and sobriety, achieving sobriety, are areas that I have some expertise in, and I offer to my clients as well. Also, addiction comes in so many forms. So shopping, gambling, relationships, cigarettes, vaping, just so many. Prescription medications, people who get addicted to prescription medications because they were prescribed them for a legitimate reason, and yet they become addicted. Of course, this has been a huge problem with OxyContin and young people taking it from their parents, and then getting addicted, and then sadly often moving to heroin as the alternative to that prescription drug, which is actually very expensive. And sadly, heroin became a much less expensive choice for many people, and this of course created its own epidemic in North American society anyway over the last 10 or 15 years. So we've got some major challenges with addiction, and physically our bodies simply become addicted. The reasons behind why we become addicted and how we break addictions are often the two parts of this dilemma that need to be addressed in order to overcome them. So in my own circumstance, I believe that my initial addiction, which came at a very young age, I became addicted to cigarettes at probably 10 years old, which is just horrifying even for me to tell you that, but that's a fact. And I came from a home where I had a sister and a brother who were older and a mom and a dad. Everybody smoked. So I kind of just took to it, and nobody was really paying too much attention. There was too much dysfunction and chaos in the family. And when we look at why we pick something up, we pick something up typically to change the way we feel. We don't feel good and we want to feel differently. And that's what a drug does. And I define alcohol as a drug as well, just to simplify matters. So cigarettes make you feel differently, especially when you first pick them up. Alcohol makes you feel differently. Marijuana, any other kind of drug, it allows us to escape the feelings that we're having that don't feel good. And I think it's about as simple as that. And the addiction part comes after some amount of time. And usually the time has gone by and we are addicted long before we're ever willing to acknowledge that we are, and even longer before we make a decision to change our behavior. Some people never change the behavior. Some people die an early death, of course, as a result of addiction. My uncle drank himself to death. My dad almost killed himself from drinking and got sober. It was sort of a one or the other, and that's often the way it goes. And other members of my family as well have suffered from addiction, and I was addicted to cigarettes, marijuana, and alcohol. So I had a good little list there to overcome. So how do we overcome addictions? Well, as I say, I think first and foremost, you need to identify what it is that the addiction is doing for you. We know most have negative outcomes, if not all. Work is also an addiction, by the way, and that has massive health repercussions oftentimes. Overworking, even exercising can be an addiction, gambling. So what does it do for you? And I've already acknowledged that it changes the way we feel. So the first step in starting to overcome an addiction is understanding what it is we're not wanting to feel. And sometimes it was something that happened when we were a child, a traumatic situation, or a number of years of growing up in a dysfunctional home. And we use that to escape the way we felt at the moment. It probably was working to some degree. And yet, as let's say we left that family dynamic, we grew up, we left home, we probably had intentions of building ourselves a much better and different life than the dysfunctional one we came from. But unfortunately, we're already carrying our addictive behaviors forward. And as we do that, we tend to attract friends, spouses that have similar issues. Like attracts like. So as that happens, unfortunately, many of us start repeating, at some level anyway, the behaviors that we grew up with and that we were pretty determined not to repeat. So once we grasp that awareness, and perhaps for me it was I had young kids, and there just came a day when I recognized that the behaviors were starting to repeat. And for me, I looked at my kids and I said, no, that cannot happen. I will not be a part of repeating my childhood trauma with these children. So that was the motivation for me. I was already miserable. I already knew that there were addiction issues within the family dynamic and that something needed to be done. So I took action and I was able to move forward. Now, there are many ways to heal from addiction. I chose a 12-step recovery approach, which worked very, very well for me. Many others recover without such a program. It doesn't really matter how you recover. The number one thing is that you have a desire. I don't believe that recovery is done well or is often successful if you're trying to do it completely on your own. You need to have some support system in place. Some people go to a treatment center and they're able to leave the treatment center with some tools in hand and can make their way into long-term recovery. Or they join a community outside of leaving a treatment facility. And again, they gather with like-minded people who are all on the path of sobriety. Whatever that looks like, it doesn't matter, but I do believe that being around people who have some similar issues is very helpful. Many people without addiction issues simply, they can sympathize with the issue, but they don't really understand it. And we can't expect them to, because it's just not something that you can fully understand if you've not experienced it yourself. So a group of like-minded people in a supportive community, I feel, is key. For me, the next other major factor in my overcoming drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes was the reliance on some form of higher power. So I'm not a religious person. I don't typically refer to my higher power as God, but I certainly could and would be comfortable with that. But I needed to believe that there was something inside of me. And that's the other thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be outside of me. Even though I believe that my higher power energy is inside of me and all around me and in you, it's part of everything that is here on earth. It's energy that creates matter. That is the power that is greater than me all by myself, that creates anything that anyone or any group of us can put our mind to. So I needed more than just willpower, my own personal power. I didn't think that me on my own. So sometimes a group of like-minded people can also be a higher power, because together we are stronger than we are on our own. So nature is often considered a higher power. I just know that I am connected. I am part of my higher power, higher consciousness. So I needed to go there and tap in and connect with it, because in addiction, we're very disconnected from our spiritual self. So I needed a higher power. I needed to reunite with my connection with that higher power, because when I had been young, I actually felt I had quite a strong connection. So I needed that. And I needed some other things to do. I didn't need new addictions per se, but for me also, exercise, making myself create natural endorphins, serotonin, all of those things that make me feel good naturally. I needed to find sources that could provide me that without using drugs or alcohol or cigarettes. So those are the three major things that I used to overcome my addictions. There are other tools as well, and I will speak to them at a later date because this is such a huge topic. And I would encourage you to comment and to ask questions and to share with me your own ideas and experiences, or where you would like some further information or support on this topic. And we will go back into it a time or two again, because it's so important to strive to overcome our addictions if we want to have a truly, deeply fulfilling life. And we do that one day at a time and one step at a time. And I am living proof that it can be done. So I thank you for joining me here. Please press the heart on the screen if you'd like to subscribe. Please share my videos. In the description, you'll find ways to connect with me for a discovery call if you want to do a complimentary call to see if one-on-one coaching may be appropriate for you. There's links to our Facebook group page, to the Instagram account, and I'll be launching a Pure Power Coaching app very soon, and I will keep you informed on this. I'm really excited about it. It's going to have so many resources available and all in one place, and I'm just so excited for us to be able to explore that together. So I'll keep you posted on that, and thanks for being here, and I'll see you again.